In this video, we're going to talk about the tenet number 6, which is business practices. But from here, I'm going to also lead into standard practice of working as an interpreter, mostly local to Southern California. A lot of it is kind of standard across the country, but there's some things that may be different. And so I want to say that most of this is specific to Southern California. So we'll start as we always do with the tenet and also the building, the guiding principle. So what the guiding principle says is basically obviously clear. We're expected to conduct business in a professional manner. We're entitled to a living wage, entitled to good working conditions, both for us and for the consumer. So a lot of times I like to remind interpreters that we get to think about ourselves too. We don't only have to focus just on the consumers and on customer service. We have to look at at ourselves in terms of self-care, because if we're not taking care of ourselves, we can't provide effective service. So here are the illustrative behaviors. And as part of the handout, it's again just cut and paste from there. And I'm going to touch on each of them just briefly and then expand on a couple of them that I pulled out. So quickly, 6.1, accurately represent qualifications such as certification, educational background, experience, and provide documentation when requested. It's exactly what it seems. Don't say you're certified when you're not. Don't present yourself to be certified when you're not. And be honest about your experience. I'm a recent graduate. I'm a novice interpreter. And you don't have to say it in a negative way where, well, I only have 2 years experience. But you can flip it around and say, I have 2 years experience, but I'm actually really great for the level I'm at. I'm actually a really great fit for this assignment. You don't need top tier, top of the line, really expensive interpreter for this simple meeting, etc. Just be honest about where you are. For me, I always think if you're honest about where you are, then you've allowed yourself room to grow. And with that comes, you've allowed yourself room to increase your rate. Because if you start at the top and that's all you can deliver, then when do you get to kind of validate or increase in your fee if you're already charging something that maybe the service is not quite worth? And we'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by that, but allow yourself room for growth in everything in terms of when you speak about your qualifications, because if you're honest about where you're coming from, then, and this is such a small world, the community will see you grow and will grow with you and allow for that as well. 6.2, this is one of them that I set aside that we're going to talk about a little bit more, but honoring your professional commitments, terminating assignments when fair. Commitment is such a huge thing with interpreting, especially because we're not working 9-to-5 jobs. So if you accept an assignment and then give it back, you've pushed such a pressure on the people scheduling, because it's really hard to get another interpreter in a last minute fashion. But also now you've got the hearing person, the deaf person, all these other people who have to reschedule. And it's really difficult to do that, and especially with the demand that's out there. And so it's really important that if you commit to something, that you honor it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in another slide. But that's really basically what it's saying. Because it's not a 9-to-5 job, then the community is really depending that if you've accepted a Tuesday 12 to 3 assignment, that you're going to show up on Tuesday at 12 o'clock and that you're going to be available to stay until the assignment ends at 3 o'clock. 6.3, Promote conditions that are conducive to effective communication. I'll also talk a little bit about this, but basically you're the one on the front lines. If you're working, for example, in the example of a college setting and you have a coordinator, the coordinator doesn't necessarily know what's happening in the classroom. And if something's happening a little bit differently or a little bit unexpected, it's your responsibility to say something. And so you're the one that is really there who can really communicate that. 6.4, if you're late or unable to honor your commitment, notify the person who needs to know as soon as you know that you cannot honor your commitment. Don't wait and hope it gets canceled. Don't wait until that same day if you can avoid it. Absolutely, people get sick. Absolutely, we're human too. But as much as possible, if you know you will not be available, you have to let someone know as soon as possible so they can start to look for a replacement. Okay, and continuing with the illustrative behavior. I'll give you a second to read. So 6.5 is reminding us to take care of ourselves. When I coordinated services, many times interpreters felt this guilt of, I'm so tired, but if I leave, or I'm so overwhelmed, or I'm not quite the right fit, but there's nobody else. And you have to remove that from your thinking. Do not have a savior complex. The world will not end if you have to leave and go home by a certain time. And the world will not end if you cannot accept an assignment, if you decline it. Because if you decline it in a timely manner, then the person looking to fill it can move on to the next one. And also, if you decline something because something's not safe or not healthy, it also indicates to the person who's scheduling, wait a minute, interpreters are people too. I have to consider them and their safety. And so it's really the responsible thing to do to decline work that maybe is not a good fit, but also that's not safe and not healthy and not conducive to interpreting. Because we have to make that known. Again, if they're going to continue to schedule something, let's say it's in an unsafe situation in a warehouse, and you just accept it like hopefully a hard hat, they'll, will save me. Maybe it's better to say, I don't want to take the assignment because of the safety reasons. In this era of the pandemic and the risk to becoming infected with COVID-19, what is our responsibility to say, yes, I want to provide service, but I will wear a face shield and I will maintain social distancing. And I do understand that there's a community, the deafblind community, that requires services, pro-tactile services and tactile services. And I'm not saying that those services shouldn't be provided, not at all. What I'm saying is, what is our responsibility to provide those services in a safe manner while taking care of ourselves? And what is our responsibility to say something? To say, I can provide this service. I must hand sanitize every whatever amount of time. Whatever it is you come up with, to make the scheduler or the people who are planning the service think about the safety of everyone involved, including you as the interpreter. 6.6 is fairly obvious. I'll give you a second to read that. 6.7 and 6.8, pro bono services and reasonable fees. I have it in another slide because I'm going to expand on it, but basically it comes to don't gouge the customer. Be reasonable with your fees. If we talked about earlier in the slide before about be honest about your level, be honest about your level. If a certified interpreter would get $55, $65, $75 an hour for an assignment, Don't charge that just because this entity can pay it. Be fair and say, I don't have that much experience. I believe my work is worth $30 an hour. This is the level I bring to you. And so being fair with what your fee is, again, gives you room to grow, but also is fair to the customer. So the customer gets to say, I can get this super qualified top tier interpreter for $100 an hour. I've got this 15-minute meeting. I could get this interpreter for $30 an hour who's got a few years experience. I'm not talking about choosing cheaper over skill. I'm talking about really just consideration of, hey, what do I need here? And then when you have been fair about your price, you get to be fair about, well, now I have 5 years experience. Now I have 7 years experience and my work is worth this much, etc. And we'll talk about what fees look like also in a little bit later. So 6.7 and 6.8 basically come to be fair about your business practice, which is specific to your billing practices. So I've pulled out a few of these bullet points because I wanted to talk about what's the standard practice. And what I mean by standard practice is this is the way it works as a rule. This is how it is in written form and a guideline. What does it mean? What are people actually doing and how are we interpreting it to mean? And how are we following it? So 6.2 and 6.4 I pulled out here, honoring professional commitments, terminating assignments, and then also informing the parties in a timely manner if you're delayed or unable to fulfill them. And I specifically want to point to two settings. It applies to everything, but my examples will point to availability and scheduling in a college setting. Most of you will probably likely start with interpreting classes in a college setting. That tends to be the best experience because most classes are teamed, and so you could maybe get paired up with a more experienced interpreter so you could still continue to learn. A lot of colleges in the area, Cerritos, Long Beach, Cal State Long Beach, offer mentoring, so you get to be paired up with a mentor and continue to develop and grow your skill. And also, I shouldn't say it, but not all classes have a lot of voice interpretation involved. So you really get to get your hands up as you get more comfortable with your receptive skills. And so with that being said, what's expected in a college setting is it's expected that if you say to one college, I'm available Monday and Wednesday, that you're not going to turn around and say to the other college, I'm available Monday, Wednesday. It really is expected that you say, I'm available Monday, Wednesday. You really should say, I'm available for a night class or all day or whatever you can give me. And you hold it until a schedule is released to you. Now, a lot of that is you have a lot of faith in the coordinator that they're going to give you hours worth your time to have given them those 2 days and held it for them. So a lot of times coordinators for newer interpreters, they may reach out to them as you get closer to publishing schedules and say, well, this is what it's looking like. This is what I have for you or what I don't have for you. To give you an opportunity to say, okay, let me check with the other coordinator who I've given Tuesday and Thursday to see what they can do. Now, in a community college setting, if you remember, we talked about how full-time jobs are really difficult to get. And what that means is there's a lot of interpreters working in a community college setting that are not full-time workers. They're working 25 to 30 hours a week. And so what they typically do is give 2 days a week here, 3 days a week here, and then they're making out with their 40-hour work week, whatever it is they've determined is what they need. It's difficult to juggle that because quite honestly, that's the lifestyle of an interpreter, piecemealing your work. But as I have said before, interpreting can be really lucrative, and it also is very rewarding. So don't think, why would anybody do that? Sometimes I think that. But it's very rewarding, and it feels good to get your hands up. There's a time that I interpreted, a time that I coordinated services, and I missed being an interpreter. I really enjoy interpreting. I feel like I was good at coordinating services, but I wanted to be on the hot seat. And so you there's nothing really that can replace enjoying what you do. I mean, we would all love health insurance, and that's very difficult because a lot of interpreters pay their own health insurance. There are full-time jobs, as I mentioned before, and I know, again, I'm going to say this again, that it doesn't fit everyone, but I do think that if you want to be a really, really great boss interpreter, that you don't limit yourself to one thing. Experience as much as possible and work with as many people as possible to continue to grow, and you will be that interpreter. And then you go back and be like, I'll take that job. Because there's so much opportunity. If you have a full-time job, there are so many opportunities that will come your way that you'll have to decline because you have a commitment you have to honor. And that's actually exactly why I have avoided a full-time job for many years. I I do operate as if I am my own business. I do operate as an independent contractor. Actually, I'll talk about a little later about becoming a corporation or LLC, but I am already a corporation, and it's very rewarding. It could be stressful, and it's you have to be responsible because you got to owe the taxes and you got to make those payments. But it's very rewarding, and and like I said, it could be lucrative. And that's not the selling point. That's like a bonus to enjoy your job and make great money at it. But why I say it is that you can plan around it and you can think about it as you plan your path. But nobody gets there without some experience in colleges. And so back to the scheduling, when you say to an agency, when you accept an assignment, the biggest faux pas an interpreter could do is to double book themselves. You have to give one of those back. Which one do you give back? Either agency is going to be like, you committed to us. You actually stain your rep just a tiny bit every time you do that. I reserve very carefully the times I have given back work. And the times I have given back work, I give as much notice as possible. And I still somehow feel awful. Like, I've given you 2 weeks notice for one day that I need, how can I know that this was going to, life happens to me. How can I know this was going to happen? But I still feel like that. And so as much as possible, I live by my calendar. I do not use an electronic calendar. I still use a paper calendar. I know people are on electronic calendars. I highlight, I plan in advance a day I'm going to have off. And honestly, a lot of times I end up working it. I just, I like to say, and I don't say this with an ego, I say because you guys should think this too. I'm a highly sought after interpreter. That's where you want to be. You want work to come to you. People don't want you to come do their jobs because you've created that name for yourself, but also because you've got the skill to back it up. So I have hit a lot of points, but back to the scheduling. For the same reason, if I accept an assignment, that's 3 hours, talking again about Tuesday from 12 to 3, and then later somebody says, hey, Arlene, I've got an 8 to 5 job. Well, I can either work 3 hours or I can work all day. Why would I not want the all day one? I do not give back work because something looks better, juicier, we got dollar signs on my eyes. No, because that's the first quick way to make myself look bad. And I honor commitments because I honor what I've accepted to do. I like to have follow through. And I always like to have follow through because I think if something should happen and I don't follow through on something, I want people to look at my history and my pattern and say, you know, that's not like her. Let's see what happened. So I want to always follow through for that. But the other thing is I'm always thinking about, I do not want to look bad. I have this saying that I tell a lot of people that I cannot believe I'm going to tell you guys here in this video, but a lot of people remember it. Ready? Do not mess with your paycheck. Why do I say that? What do I mean? I mean, why are you going to start giving yourself a bad reputation now if it's going to end up affecting the opportunities that come to you and the work that comes to you? Why would I give back work if it's going to end up meaning that later, spring semester, summer semester, etc., you're not going to schedule me and give me work? Why would I take it 12 to 3 and be like, ooh, actually, I got a better offer, sorry, if later I might need you because now I've got nothing. Over one day, over one thing, I've messed with my future paycheck. Don't do that. For the same reason, with relationships, I always think, if I don't like you, that's your problem, because I'm not going to give back work because we don't get along. We might not be friends, we might not have lunch together, but I'm going to show up. I'm not going to give back work. And there's people who have a list of people who they will not work with. And sometimes I think, ooh, people have to make a living. You have to, I have a child in college. I cannot do that. I cannot have a list of no's. That's insane. So don't mess with your own paycheck. That's what this is about. Honor the commitment that you've accepted. When you give availability, know that it means you're basically holding it. You're holding the time to be scheduled. And it's okay to reach out and say, hey, do you have an idea what that schedule's looking like? Sometimes I have said, you don't have to tell me the schedule, but tell me, is it like 8 to 5, 9 to 2? Because then I can start to open up those hours and get other work. I'm like holding it for you. And the other thing, typically with college work, if you accept a schedule for the semester, you will complete the semester. You will work your personal appointments, your vacations, anything that takes a big chunk of your time during class time, you will work that around the semester schedule. In fact, College Mount SAC and their coordinating team met with our team at Cerritos College, and they have a rule that the interpreter can miss as many days as a student can before they're dropped. And the reason behind that is not just commitment, but from the side of scheduling. Why is it important that you show up and that you keep a schedule? Well, one, it's really hard to replace an interpreter, right? Especially last minute. And if you've got a whole schedule that looks nice and you're there on campus, but then you just got to take off for half the day, sometimes it's hard to fill those things. But the other thing is continuity of service. When you're in the classroom and you've interpreted algebra or history, and a certain terminology keeps coming up, the way you signed it is going to be unique to you, but also you've kind of set an expectation from the student, and the student kind of now understands. And the same thing happens with conferences and meetings. A lot of times they want the same interpreters because of continuity of service. Maybe the way one interpreter signs something is different than the sub-interpreter might sign it, but then it's also the schema behind it. If you have been interpreting this class the entire semester, you know where this class is headed, you know what they've been talking about it, you're more familiar with it, you have the ability to think back and piece together the story that you've been listening to the whole time you've been there, whereas someone who shows up cold to just replace you that day, they're not going to have that. And they may not use a sign that you set up for specialized vocabulary. They may hear a word and be like, is that right? But you already knew that that was introduced as vocabulary, etc. And so continuity of service affects the success of a student. And in the community, continuity of service affects the success of whatever the setting might be for an employee, a staff meeting, a training, anything. And so honoring your commitment is as much about the scarcity of the resource of interpreters. It's as much about business practice as it is about what's best for the consumer and providing service and providing that same level of service. Because I'll tell you that even as experienced as I think I am, I have been that substitute interpreter and felt a little lost and felt a little like, I don't know what the interpreters have been doing. And they have a way of understanding each other because they've been in this class this whole time. And here I come with my cool chops that doesn't do anything because they've already have this understanding. And so it doesn't just throw them off, but it throws me off also. I don't want to be really in that position. I mean, we all have to at some point or not, but it's a difficult kind of sticky position to be in. So that's what honoring your commitment and canceling in an appropriate fashion is all about. And I wanted to make sure that you understand the expectation in the community and in the field regarding your responsibility behind that. Here's two other ones that I pulled out for you. Rendering pro bono services in a fair and reasonable manner, and then charging the fair and reasonable fees. First, I want to touch on rendering pro bono services. So when we do volunteer work, interpreting is still considered a new field. And our responsibility is also to portray that, to portray ourselves as a professional service that is paid. In addition to that, there are entities that have a responsibility to provide service. For example, and I keep going to the college setting because I think that this is the best way that makes your mind click. For example, Cerritos College is responsible to provide interpreters in the classroom. If you decided, I'll volunteer for my friend, it's fine. You have to understand the implications behind that, which is that you've just kind of taken away the entity's responsibility. So they're like, I don't have to pay for service because he volunteers there. By the way, most entities will not allow volunteer interpreters for this reason. They know it's their responsibility. But let's say that they were the entity that wants to get away with it. And so what you've done is you've now made it difficult for the deaf person to request a qualified interpreter because the entities, what stops them from saying, no, it's going to cost me $150 to get you an interpreter. Get your volunteer again. Oh, the volunteer that isn't certified and maybe isn't quite familiar with this and doesn't have a lot of experience and didn't know the implications of doing that. Yeah, get that one. Maybe the volunteer is no longer even available. So you have a responsibility when an entity is responsible to ensure that they pay for service. And that it doesn't mean they have to pay you. It can mean they pay an employee. It can mean they reach out to an agency. But you have a responsibility to say to the entity, you're responsible for this and I have to charge you. Or what's your way of recruitment? Because that's what you need to do. Now, I do want to give you an example of something that I've done. And I want to tell you that I've done it with great thought behind it. I have a friend, and I've done it for a couple of friends, who was going through several interviews. He was applying at several places. Normally, when you apply at an organization, a company with, I believe the number is 500 employees or more, you have a responsibility to pay for the interpreter. I could be wrong on the numbers, but um, my friend would reach out to me because he's like, I'm trying to make an impression and I'd rather provide my own interpreter. And my friend offered to pay me. Now, I didn't want to accept his money because I feel a conflict in accepting money from a deaf person for interpreting services. I have taken money for something else, but I feel bad for accepting money for interpreting services. So I said to my friend, I know they're responsible, but I absolutely understand what you're trying to do. You're trying to make an impression. So I said, I will be there. And if it comes up, did you bring your own interpreter? Yes, and please tell them you paid for service, but I'm not going to charge you. Why did I say please say you paid for services? Because if it comes up, I want them to realize that this is a paid service and they're not going to get it for free. He's not going to always have his friend. But also when I arrived, I was still dressed like a professional because they don't know it was free. I'm still following the code of conduct, whether it's volunteer work or not. And so that's something that I have done. I have also done other services with an organization that was, they were offering a stipend for an interpreter. And I just wanted to volunteer. And I said to the head of the organization, I would like to just volunteer my time. And she actually said to me, you know, I don't want you to have a bad experience. You're going to drive all this way, and our stipend barely covers like dinner. So she said, I think you should at least keep dinner. So I said, fair point. How about I charge you half your stipend? And then I said, because they were also hiring other interpreters, but this is just, I'm doing this for my own soul and my own comfort and my own values. And so I cannot place judgment on the other interpreters who accept the money because I don't know their situation. And I don't think it's wrong to accept that a stipend was offered. But for me, I'll accept half because right now, at this time in my life, I can. I don't know. COVID-19 is happening now, and if she asks me again, I might be like, yes, I'll take it. I don't know. But what I'm trying to say is I I kind of work that out, but I always keep it between me and the consumer because I'm not offering pro bono services for the world to see me as the volunteer interpreter. I'm offering it because I'm giving back to the community. And if only me and this person know that, that's really all who needs to know that. But why am I doing that? It's a little bit, I like to believe, because I have humility, but mostly it's because I'm following the CPC and I want to ensure that people realize that we are a paid service. And so when it comes to volunteering my time, I do volunteer my time. I do it actually pretty often, but no one knows about it and no one has to know about it because that's not why I volunteer my time. Uh, I hope that makes sense. So along the same lines with volunteering my time, I have also volunteered for the, if you've heard of VITA, VITA, the um, Volunteer Income Tax Preparation Services with the IRS. And they actually were looking for volunteer interpreters. And at first I thought, wait a minute, Should they have volunteer interpreters? You know, I always think who's responsible and should they be responsible? But in the VITA program, actually the CPA who was the head of it was also volunteering her time. So it was fair. Another professional is volunteering their time. It's fair that I volunteer my time. And actually they ended up paying for my time. So I wanted to, but why I share that with you is so you can see and work through this considerations that I go through when someone asks me to volunteer my time. It's not simple, but the reason it's not simple is because it affects the consumer. It affects the next consumer requesting service, and it also affects your colleague who is now trying to get paid for service. And there's nothing wrong with making a living. That's not absolutely not what the whole point of this is. I mean, you're in this training not because you're pursuing a passion, but because you're pursuing a career. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with making a living. So back to the second bullet, understand the implications of working independently when a team is required or of working past and aside in time. So why I added this is it's similar to pro bono work. If you accept an assignment and really it should have been two, it's your responsibility to say something. It's your responsibility to say, I need a team. And even after the fact, I needed a team and one was not provided. It's also your responsibility that if you accepted, again, that Tuesday 12 to 3, and you were there and it actually went till 4 o'clock and you were able to stay, that you turn around and you charge for that extra time for that other hour, because the scheduler should know that this was extended. Everyone involved should know that they should be honoring your time and your commitment, but also it's your responsibility to charge for that service. And a lot of times it's not just about this rendering pro bono services, 6.7 part of the Tenet, but it's also as an entity who's responsible to provide service. How do I prove that I have provided the service that's required by law if I don't have an invoice for it that shows I paid for it? So we're kind of connected in that way. You have to charge me and I have to pay you so that I could prove that I did it. So don't shy away from things like that. And my last bullet here that says honor your commitment and your rate. I want to say to you is if you charged, and I'm making these numbers, I'm just pulling them out, but you charged $30 an hour and you showed up to a job and you find out that the other team, who you think has comparable skills, charged $45 an hour. Don't call up the person, the scheduler, and be like, well, they're getting 45 and I think I deserve 45. Because as a customer, when you call your cable provider and get a quote, does it upset you when all of a sudden they want to charge you a different fee because a different provider you were willing to pay them more? How about a plumber? You call the plumber and a different one shows up and charges less, and you're like, okay, I'll go with the one that charges less. Do they then call you and say no because that other guy was getting $15 more? That doesn't happen. And that leaves kind of people feeling a little like, what kind of business are you in? But what I do say about that is learn from it. Be like, I charge 30 bucks and wow, okay. Maybe the market is saying that I can charge a little bit more. That's really how you kind of get a feel for what's happening in the market, because we can't collude, which means we can't agree on our rates. But what we can do is see kind of what the market is saying is what entities are willing to pay for interpreters. And so you can learn from it. And maybe you want to increase your rate and maybe you don't. Sometimes I show up to a job and someone else is making more money and I'm like, yeah, you're amazing. I can see why. because I don't want to switch with you because they're getting not what they're going to get when I switch with you. So that's fair to it doesn't bother me because I'm an adult. I know we're all here to make money. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I should have next time. And I do. I learn for next time. That's how business goes. So now that was the tenet, and I want to lead on to the work of an interpreter. Interpreters are basically in private practice, and this is actually part of the So You Want to Be an Interpreter book, starting on page 389, which is chapter 14. I cut some information, but then I kind of filtered it to match what I want to talk about. So, what does it look like out there? I had already mentioned to you that most interpreters are independent contractors, which means you're self-employed, which means you're a small business owner in the eyes of the IRS. So that means you're either a sole proprietor, an S corp, or an LLC. I became an S corp many years ago, but I want to tell you, I am not advising you to become a corp or an LLC. Do not do that without talking to a tax person. I'm just giving you an idea of where your life is headed if you continue working independently. Of course, AB5 may affect us. With AB5, a lot of agencies are saying that interpreters should be an S corp or an LLC, and they're kind of being really pushy about it. But the fact is that AB5 may not care if you are one or not. They're really looking to secure jobs for people, not specific to interpreting, but most independent contractors. So we don't know what our work will look like in terms of if AB5 doesn't get, we don't get the exemption with AB5. I'm just saying this so you can kind of keep in mind. And a lot of interpreters work part agency and also part multiple job sites. So if you think of yourself, say you work, that example, Monday, Wednesday at Cerritos, Tuesday, Thursday at Long Beach City College, Fridays for an agency. No job is withholding enough taxes, and then the agency isn't withholding enough taxes. So you really have to prepare for that because when you have a full-time job, you expect that your job withholds taxes for your year-to-date income, but because you're kind of piecemealing it from everywhere and they're reporting it as a whole sum, that's why a lot of interpreters are affected. And I just want to let you know so that you can start to plan for that. Being a certified interpreter in the LA area, I have seen this. You can make six figures. You can also not. And it's really what you put into it. And I really believe that building your brand is a big part of it. And a big part of that is being the whole package, which is the soft skills on top of your actual interpreting technique and skill. That is what's going to get you there. It is absolutely possible. And I've seen it. Becoming a certified interpreter will change your life. Being an interpreter, that alone will change your life. Learning about the work that we do in the community that we work with, you will never be the same person. I always think no matter what I do in my life, there's always going to be an interpreter in me. I've learned so much in my life, in my career, and my experience. There's an interpreter in me always. And that's just something that's never, no matter what I do, is never going to go away. My life has been changed. And financially, my life has been changed becoming a certified interpreter. And I believe the same is true for you. Just when you started your ASL classes, you already started to change your life. I am sure that your mind has been open to so many things and that you've experienced so many aha moments, and I'm sure you're excited about your future and you can't wait to get there. All of that is the most amazing thing, and it will continue to happen. And I want to tell everyone that you're in the right place, and do not let anyone ever tell you that you don't belong here. And the other thing is that your life will continue to change, because even though there's no full-time work, guess what? Nobody's looking for them, because they're being a boss and a baller, and they're making it happen with all the opportunity that's out there, and the experiences and the adventures, and just the privilege that we have to work in so many different environments, that people are saying, you know what, I'll pay my own health insurance because I'm going on that paid cruise, etc. So, on to the next bullet. Pay rates vary with sign language agencies. Most sign language agencies will set a rate. They tell you certified gets this, level 4, 3, whatever, however they screen you. They designate your level, as many colleges also. But spoken language agencies are more open to negotiating, which is really the truest, um, the truest way of being an independent contractor and a self-employed person and a small business owner, is to set your own rates. But somehow sign language agencies tell us what our rate is. I'll leave it at that. The standard in the area is a 2-hour minimum. Spoken language agencies sometimes negotiate a half-day rate or a full-day rate, and a half-day does not mean 4 hours. A half-day means 3 hours, and a full day means 6. Pretty cool, right? And those things, mostly that's spoken language, but most agencies and even colleges will offer a 2-hour minimum, meaning if the class is an hour and 15 minutes and that's the only thing you came for, you will be paid 2 hours. That's what I mean by 2-hour minimum. 24, 48, 72-hour cancellation policies. Those things vary. Typically what I see is the agency has a 72-hour cancellation policy. This doesn't bother me because they need time to get the cancellation, find who's scheduled, reach out to them, etc. Most interpreters, in turn, get a 48-hour cancellation policy. Occasionally it's 24. Like there's one agency that if you're booked for over the 2-hour minimum, it's a 48-hour cancellation. If it's a 2-hour job, it's a 24-hour cancellation. And what that means is if they cancel within that time period, you're still paid in full. I put the last bullet: mileage, parking, and reimbursements. Sometimes an agency will say, okay, submit your parking receipt for reimbursement. Sometimes, this is one difference. In other states, it's kind of a standard to charge mileage. In LA, it's not really, because everybody drives anyway. But sometimes you can add it to your invoice as a reimbursement. I'm just telling you, it's not a reimbursement. They're negotiating with you. They want you to do this job, but you're still paying it out of your pocket, and then it's still going to get taxed at the end of the year. So keep your receipts. That's my 2 cents on that. I'll give you a second to look at the cost of doing business. This is also from the book, So You Want to Be an Interpreter, page 393. These are some things that your book kind of categorizes and says you can write off or track your expenses. And so the reason that I put them here is just to remind you that it's going to cost you money to be an interpreter. You're going to have wear and tear on your car. You're going to be buying ink, buying your calendar, paying for your cell phone so that you can get those jobs. You're going to be planning for taxes. This is the third one's really important. Taxes, retirement, and insurance. That is most of the time completely on you. So you're going to have to plan for that. Then your time to come home and send your invoice. Business clothing is not something that you can typically write off, but that's something that you have to invest in. All those black shirts, mostly solid colors. And just to remind you, we wear solid colors to avoid eye fatigue and to not be distracting. And also should be solid, but also not bright. Like I shouldn't have a solid, super bright, hot pink long sleeve shirt. That's not going to work either. And also, for example, I could probably, like in this situation, wear a lighter color shirt so I could have more contrast here. I typically wear long sleeves if I'm going to be signing with you guys. I don't show my tattoo if I'm interpreting. There's some people that do anyway. That's just kind of, I mean, everyone has a tattoo now, but it's my own self-imposed rule because I feel like I want to show up like I'm worth what they're paying. And maybe another person shows up and they're still going to get work, but I believe that my value is more. And so I never wait to be asked if I could cover it. No one is ever going to really ask. But if my goal is to be not distracting, then I don't want someone to point it out and be like, what does it say? Or, which is nice normally, personally, on a conversation level. But when I'm working, it's not cool because I realize you're not watching the message that I'm interpreting. You're asking me about that. I've already taken away from the message, and my job is the message. So I just don't wait for that moment to happen. I just always cover it when I'm working, and again, because I want to be worth what I'm charging, quite honestly. And professional insurance is the last one. Things to consider, but I'm not saying you graduate and you need to spend all this money. Just things to consider as you start building and growing your work. Here's another part of Arlene wisdom. I say that because I say these same things to people all the time, and then they tell me back that they don't forget. But I think your best advertising is your own PR. Build your brand. Really, really like value your name and your reputation, because that's what's going to get you work. In the beginning, when you're trying to be known and trying to make a name for yourself and trying to make connections, it's difficult. But as people see you showing up to workshops, to webinars, to events, as you network, part of the assignment of reaching out to an interpreter and interviewing them is to kind of connect and click with somebody, because at some point, that's going to be your team. That might be your boss. That might be another professional reference. That might be the person you're observing at another time. Or that might be the person offering you a different opportunity because they've remembered your name. So that's so important to show up, to network, and really participate in your profession. Participate in the profession that you have chosen, because that really is you investing in you, and it's going to lead to your success. As my last slide, I'm showing you a sample invoice. And what I want you to really notice here is, I always indicate it's a bill, so there's the invoice. I always include an invoice number because a lot of organizations reference that on their payment history. But then also, for example, if I had the same assignment 3 weeks in a row and one of them isn't paid, I can refer to the date, but I can also say invoice number 2684 has not been paid. And then it kind of more specifically points to what's missing. Contract number That's only if you get it. Sometimes organizations will give you a job number or a PO number. That's what I put there. I date the invoice separately from the date of the assignment. I typically put under this time billed, I typically put the name of the deaf person and the location and or a meeting name. Like I might say staff meeting at EDD and client name so-and-so, Joe Smith. I might put the city, Los Angeles, if that makes a difference, and then the total amount due. You can also put somewhere here your terms, due within 30 days, due within 10 days, due within 20 days. I used to have my terms on there, but turns out people pay when they feel like paying. And instead what I have is I have a separate agreement that I have people sign or organizations sign, and it says the terms there. But again, they pay when they feel like paying. But I put the terms there so that I could put a late payment fee. Because if it's not there, then you can't really charge a late fee because what's late? You never said what was on time. So the important thing from the invoice is where are they going to send the check to? How do they get a hold of you if they couldn't make that happen? Is this a bill? Invoice number, job details. And don't short yourself. Always double check your math. I added this invoice template because I found when I started interpreting that a lot of interpreters would ask, newer interpreters, like, do you have an invoice? What does your invoice look like? And do you have an invoice? What does your invoice look like? So I thought that this would be really helpful to you to see what one looks like. That's the end of this very long session on business practices. Thank you for watching this one.